I wish I had understood the difference between doing the work for others versus being a coach, providing, guidance and feedback, and then letting them find success. When you transition to leader, that's no longer the measurement for you. It's making sure that others are successful. And so that's really what I wish I knew, that there's a difference between doing the job and providing the successful environment for others to do it well.
Today's guest is Tracey DeSilva, who is the Vice President of Learning and Development and comes to us from the healthcare industry. Tracey's leadership experience includes holding positions as a national sales director, district sales manager, and at one time, a human resources business partner. Tracey, welcome to the Jam Session.
Hey, Rob, good to be with you.
Are you ready to jam?
Let's do this.
Let's start with your leadership journey. Let's actually go back. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about the first team you ever took over. And as you think through it, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
It's a great question. I think that transition from individual contributor, right, or leader of self to leader of others is so challenging. And once you've gone through it and you look back on it, the perspective is really rich. For me, in the most simplistic terms, I wish I had understood the difference between doing the work for others versus being a coach, providing, guidance and feedback, and then letting them find success.
So what did that look like when you did that?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was in my first line leader role for the very first time, and I had moved directly from a individual contributor role, though certainly had taken advantage of leadership coursework in and around the industry. And we were off to a great start. By all my metrics, we were performing well. It was a sales leadership role. We were performing well against the goals of the quarter and the year. And probably several months in, I started to notice that when I would send emails out about a specific way to do something relative to some data we had received or a marketing objective, I started to get a little bit of, sort of chafing. Members of the team, mostly the more tenured ones, would email me back and say, well, I've always done this, or I've had success with this approach. And at first, I sort of just let it roll past me and kept on my path of delivering my direction. Until one day in a one-on-one with my then leader, I shared that I was sensing there was this, little bit of chafing from, one or two members of the team. And I suspect he might have heard some of that too, but handled it very, very respectfully and probably somewhat gently, given I was new to the role. And he said something simplistic, but so profound. And he said, Tracey, your way is not the only way. Now, that doesn't sound like it should be a lightning bolt in anybody's life, but it was for me because, Rob, up until that time, I had received significant reward and recognition based on the tactical success of an individual contributor. And as I said, when you first asked me the question, when you transition to leader, that's no longer the measurement for you. It's making sure that others are successful. And so that's really what I wish I knew, that there's a difference between doing the job and providing the successful environment for others to do it well.
Let's be honest, that's the hardest transition that anybody can make, going from that individual contributor to now seeing the world through the lens of a leader, right? And how everyone does things a little bit different than you would. And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard to make that transition. Fortunately, you had a boss who was able to give you some coaching. There's a lot of new managers out there that never get that coaching. And in your case, you actually were sensing some of that anyway. Just curious what that looked like with your team. Did you address it or?
Yeah, it's funny because there was one member of that team that I knew was very comfortable being outspoken. He had a great sense of humor, was sort of the heart and humor of the team. And I thought, if anyone's going to shoot straight with me, it's going to be him. So in very soon order, I was working with him closely on a couple of days on a field ride. And I just said to him, what's the team temperature right now? How am I doing? Give me a report card, give me a grade. And he said some very nice things, said that I'd come on board and listened and sought to get to know folks and connect. And then he said pretty quickly, he said, but, you're also trying to do our jobs for us. And I said, so what does that look like for you? What does that feel like? He said, well, the emails when the sales reports come in at the granular level of what to do with a specific physician. And he said, Tracey, you'd be well served to recognize the tenure on your team, to leverage each one of us to make each other better and share successes and challenges.
How'd you react to that?
I think I somehow made the wise choice to know which person on the team to ask first, right?
Okay.
He is someone with whom I connected quickly. He has a very sort of high energy, openness, relatability to him. And I knew he actually had aspirations to be a leader as well, which he has grown into being by this point in his career. So I thought he would just shoot straight with me. And I am a fairly direct person in terms of, personality style, communication style. So I took it to mean that he really wanted me to be a successful leader and that we had greatness amongst us. And I just had to be the architect of that greatness. I didn't have to be the bricklayer anymore.
I think that's an important takeaway is you have to ask the right person on the team. Right? I mean, eventually, I think we all work towards asking all the people on the team. But I think in that initial first step, I think that is a really good strategy, right? To figure out which is the right person on the team that's going to give you that objective and that fair feedback. Let's just fast forward a little bit. I appreciate you sharing that story. So now you're in a role where you are a second line leader. And so you have managers reporting into you. And I'm curious, I know we were talking about this the other day. You were sharing a little bit about one of the missteps you had when you first moved into that role. I wonder if you can share that with us, because I think, so much we can learn just by sharing some of the missteps we did.
Yeah. So there's a difference between being a first line leader and a second line leader. And I didn't really have anybody to explain that to me. I certainly observed it. You were one of those people that I observed over the years do the role, but you don't really know it unless someone's actually, kind of told you all the ins and outs, or until you get into it. In my case, I stepped into a second line leader role brand new to an organization. And we had an incredible amount of pressure and spotlight on us because we were going to build a team and launch a drug all in 6 months. Good news of the story is we did do that. And I was fortunate to have really strong first line leaders join my team. But what ended up happening is not dissimilar to the sort of stumble I made early in my leadership career. I made another one as a second line leader. And this is the scenario. We had to make an incentive compensation decision, right? We were in a launch year with zero history in the marketplace, and certainly zero history for a product we were just launching. My leader came to me and said, okay, here are the options on the table. What do you want to do? And we had a really robust conversation. But believe it or not, this might astound you, we made a decision by the end of that singular conversation. And then, probably in my eagerness to impress him with my decision-making skills and my willingness to communicate said decision, I put a call on the calendar for the next day with him and my leaders, and we announced the decision was made. And Rob, you could have heard a pin drop in the silence. It went over like a lead balloon. And believe it or not, I couldn't figure out why. Because what had actually happened is I had been given all the information I'd been given and made the best decision I thought possible through the lens of those first line leaders. Again, I was doing their job versus coming to them, which I now know with perspective, and saying, team, we've got a couple options on the table given the historic nature of this launch. And these are the options. What are your thoughts? Right. I didn't do that step. So what I sacrificed in communicating the decision was any level of understanding and certainly any level of buy-in that I needed for my leadership team to communicate now to their direct reports. In the sales world, when you look at an incentive compensation plan, that is a hot topic. If there's something that you want to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's, that'd be the one. But at the same time, a lot of times that decision really is held within just a few people. It's a very difficult balance to walk. Did you get a sense right after that call, or how did you address it with your team? Yeah, it was. So the other caveat, just so we understand, is, so you're building a team, and a lot of these managers you hired, but they're new to you. Correct. Okay. Correct. For the most part, they were new to me, hadn't known me but 8 months earlier than this dialogue around incentive comp that we had to make at the end of a year. So I think they say that trust or credibility, right, is gained in drops and lost, right, in buckets. I certainly think I dealt a blow. It's one of those decisions that to this day still haunts me a little bit as kind of that memory that left the bruise, right? Because I would never do that again, knowing what I know now. But I will say that for several of them, I think I had certainly established enough trust that they picked up the phone pretty quickly and gave me feedback. And they gave me feedback within the context of what happened when they told their teams the following day, right? This is a very fast sequence of events, right? Decision made on day one between my leader and I, decision communicated to my leadership team on day two, and then from them to their direct reports on day three. So not a lot of time for reflection and perspective. So after they communicated to their teams on day three is when I really started to get the feedback, and it was strong, to the point of people said, "Wow, we didn't come here for this kind of experience."
Wow.
Yeah, stop you in the
Must have been
tracks.
hard to
Actually,
hear.
yeah, it was. Well, I actually had one or two people, eventually when they left the organization months later, bring that up as an issue that had sort of stuck with them.
Hmm.
And it was pivotal learning and understanding for me about inclusion when you can. There was nothing, by the way, preventing me from sharing the details around those options. I just thought I was, doing the work again. I could just make the decision for them.
First of all, I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that story, because for those of us out there that are planning to either move into that second line leadership role or have aspirations to do so, there are nuances. This was hard for me when I moved into that role. Obviously, the basics still apply, but there are some nuances that are a little bit different. But this is one of them. And I am curious because from what I'm hearing, it's not like you had to make the decision or you were trying to micromanage it. Share a little bit of where it was coming from, like the thought process of that decision.
Yeah, it really, in my mind, was a positive intent, right? If you
Right.
think of, decisions in terms of intent versus impact, my intent was positive. I thought that by the way, I chose the best option on the table, something I had to tell the team later repeatedly so I could rebuild some trust back.
By the way,
Yeah, by the way, even though you don't
right.
know all of it, I chose the best one. I think it's very nuanced at that level because certainly at the second line leader level and beyond, leadership is much more about influence than anything else. You can certainly demand people do something as their leader, but what you get is sort of an immediate reaction, not something that's sustainable and certainly nothing that drives engagement, as I learned, sadly.
Mm.
But if you use influence and you include people in dialogue and decision making, then what you end up with is, even if people have a hard time understanding the decision down the road, what you end up with, though, is a more enduring cultural win around inclusion and trust and confidence. So it's that nuance, it's that ability to step away from controlling the outcome by
Yeah.
demanding it, and more so looking to provide communication influence and lay out what
Yeah.
options are there and what the impact of each option will be.
So I'm curious because you said it was positive intent. So what held you back from reviewing the options with them?
Nothing, speed, nothing other
Speed.
than
Yeah.
speed. I knew that we had to make a decision within a few days, and I just went to it. And one of my favorite sayings now is, "What can I do less of, yet spend more
Mhm.
time thinking about?" It sounds counterintuitive, but at a certain point in your leadership journey, you really should be doing less and thinking more so that you can make, strategic choices. And then for critical decisions, you're including the people at the table who should really help cover your blind spot and help you talk through that decision.
Yeah.
So nobody said to me at any point in time, you can't talk to your leadership team. I just put my head down and started running.
That's so well said because you kind of reminded me I fell into similar traps. And it's all positive intent. And there are times where I would sit back and think of my managers and all that's on their plates
Mhm.
and think through, all right, this is one that I'll just make a decision because I don't want to have to put another call. They're swamped with calls. So in my mind, I'm doing them a favor. And in reality, that's come back to bite me quite a few times because they would have preferred to be included in the conversation. It wasn't that I was trying to exclude them. It was, I'm thinking I'm doing them a favor.
When we do that, we unintentionally hinder their ability to lead, because all they become then is your mouthpiece. All they become is, hey, Tracey made this decision. Hey, Rob made this decision. You need to execute. And it robs them of the ability to own the decision and communicate it in a way that's authentic for them.
kudos to you, because it sounds like you have that relationship and that trust built with your team where they were able to just come forward and talk to you about it and give you some feedback. And then sounds like you adjusted right on the fly. You go back to the first story you shared about when you were a frontline leader, and similar, right? Some similar scenarios there. And I do want to just highlight how, again, just because you move into a higher level position doesn't mean that you're not going to come across some of the same missteps, some of the same stumbles you're making as a frontline leader. So it's easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, I think it requires, right, looking inward and reflecting.
Mhm.
And for me, I think, my personality is that of sort of driver, doer, accomplish, end result, solution focus. And that can blur the lens that should be on team collaboration and conversation and communication. You need both, right? Organizations need us to achieve our goals, but we also need to engage our people while we do it. So we have to manage the work, but lead the people. And that's really the ultimate lesson I've learned from those kinds of experiences.
And it sounds like, as you said it before, that in that second line leadership role, it is really about being more strategic and doing less. Is that kind
Yeah.
of what?
Yeah. It's hard. I've taken up the habit recently, and I talk to folks around me all the time about stopping to write down things, whether you call that journaling, note taking. I don't mean things that are being said in a meeting. I mean thoughts and reactions to things, and then forcing yourself to take time. I was fortunate until quarantine began that I was on a plane every week, going
Right.
somewhere and returning home from somewhere. And I used that time to look through my journal. I would sit on the plane and look through it. And I'd look back at a week before or 2 weeks before about a sentiment I had captured with regards to a conversation or a feeling I'd had about something going on in my team. And it's fascinating, right? Because those feelings change with time, those perspectives grow with time. And unless you sort of commit yourself to the discipline of giving yourself time to think, then you are probably destined to continue to
Mm-hmm.
make those same, kinds of errors that are probably natural to your personality type.
So do you spend time each week just kind of jotting down different ideas, different thoughts, and then reflecting on it?
Yeah, I do. I
And
do.
has that helped you with your decision making or?
It has. It is probably one of the better muscles and activities I've created. I mean, COVID is, the quarantine has certainly helped me to strengthen the muscle because I have a little bit more time not running through airport security lines right now.
Right.
But I have really been mindful. There's an intentionality to that I can feel it pervading everything I do, whether I'm having a call with someone who is in a tactical role on my team and I'm preparing for that by thinking and looking back at notes around the project that may be weeks old and bringing them back to ground them in the objectives of the project. Or if I've actually just captured a way I felt about something that was said or a way I reacted to something as a way of sort of self reflection to slow down my thought processes and my decision making skills.
I think that's a great technique. I've heard of leaders doing that, and it's glad to hear you kind of talk through it because I can hear how it's an advantage and how it's benefited you. I do have another question for you, which I think you answered, and this is coming from some of the talking points you gave me in the intro, which I didn't mention in the intro because I wanted to ask you about it. And some of the talking points you wrote were that you are a lifelong learner, and you also stated that you are a recovering perfectionist. Now, I get the lifelong student in you. I can hear that in how you're sharing your stories. However, the recovering perfectionist, perhaps, I think I know where you're going with this, with some of the things that you mentioned before, but perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that.
Yeah, certainly in the leadership journey, I've been on, I have noticed that perfection is the thief of excellence for me. That I am often running so quickly and in such hot pursuit of the perfect outcome that I speed right past the excellent outcome. And excellence is a very good outcome to have for an organization. But when you pursue perfection, you sort of have blinders on. You won't allow yourself consciously to consider a lot of the other things that could make the decision excellent, but bring people into it, right? Or consider it from a different angle that benefits the organization. Yeah, perfectionism is something I've been working on for years. I got feedback probably, I don't know, 5 years ago on that, and it stunned me. I remember hearing it for the first time that I was perceived this way as a perfectionist, and I thought, how is that possible? I'm the furthest thing from that. But as I dug more into the feedback, and by the way, feedback in my personal life started to have a similar theme. I thought, boy, I'm projecting something that people are picking up. And the problem with that is if you project that as a leader, it's a barrier to people telling you what you need to hear in feedback. It's a true barrier. It's one of the reasons why I'm very conscious about the way I ask for feedback. Depending on the audience I'm asking, I'll use casual phrases like, hey, got my big girl pants on today. Go ahead and, and give it to me.
Right.
Or, if I'm talking to somebody maybe more of a peer, I'll say, hey, if we were to leave this meeting and you walked out the door and said, boy, the one thing I wish I'd said to Tracey is X. Can you say that now? I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. And I know that if you think you have all the answers and you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. So change rooms. But the willingness for me to take the feedback that the perception was that I was a perfectionist, even though it didn't seem to resonate with me as a reality, I had to accept that that was the reality for people who were interacting with me, even if I wasn't consciously projecting that. And again, my leadership, and you said the word vulnerable earlier on, my leadership has become profoundly more vulnerable because I'm willing to actually say, hey, I'm not perfect. I don't know all the answers and I need your help. Asking for help is huge in leadership.
So many people are afraid of it because they think it's a sign of weakness, when in fact, the leaders that do show vulnerability are the most confident ones of them all, because they can do that. They understand the value it's going to bring to them. And I love the quote, perfectionist is a thief of excellence. I think that's profound, and I think that's fantastic. I'll come back to some of the things that you were stating, how you're a driver, how you speed through things, and the way you're wired. You are a driver, and it's, to me, a strength overused at times becomes a perceived weakness. And it's
Correct.
perceived because the other person might just think very different. And for yourself, it's just, this is natural. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
striving to make sure everything is as perfect as it can be.
In the leadership role I'm in now, Rob, I have a set of direct reports who are the complete opposite of me in terms of
Mm,
profiles, right? Whether you want to call them behavioral styles or whatever, but they are
right.
literally on the 180-degree turn away from me. It's been a gift. And what I did early on when I stepped into leading the team and recognized what their personality and behavioral styles were is I reached out to someone of the same style who's been in my professional peer set for a long time and whom I respect and trust. And I actually asked him to go to dinner with me. And he didn't know that he was going to have to give some free counseling when he got to dinner. But we got to dinner and I said, hey, you're this behavioral style. And now all of my direct reports are of the same style. And it's the complete opposite of me. What do I do? He said two things. One, I was probably getting to this realization over time because of the experiences I shared with you earlier. But one he said was, stop running so fast you don't see the cliff edge in front of you. And the other one was, take these people out to dinner, coffee, whatever works, one on one and get to know them. Now, that may seem simplistic to our listeners, but for me, it actually was a little more profound than that because my personality, my behavioral style would have been, hey, I came in, we did the kickoff meeting, shared my vision, addressed them as a group, and empowered them, and off we go. And there I was again, right?
Mhm.
Running fast. And I wanted this time not to hit the cliff edge like I had before. And so I did that one-on-one lunches or dinners or coffees with my direct reports. And
How'd that
it
go
does
over?
make a difference. Yeah, it makes a difference. There is a level of connection that I was probably never going to get treating them as a collective group.
And again, kudos to you for reaching out to another peer of the same style and asking for advice. And I think that's an important takeaway for everyone who's listening in, that that is a sign of maturity, right? Of a very seasoned leader, knowing that they have to go out and get some guidance.
Yeah, and also, if you go back to the perfectionist issue, for me, I was determined this time not to think I had the perfect answer for this team, not to think that I was going to be able to step in and be the perfect leader or provide for them the perfect environment. And we talk all the time on my team about debate me, what am I not seeing, what's in my blind spot, how would you experience this exact same scenario given your different personality or behavioral style than I am. So I'm always trying now, right? Years and years of learning. A couple of bruises that might be lifelong bruises, but I'm always trying to stay conscious of asking for input and help and guidance so that I don't let those perfectionist tendencies overtake me again and just keep running towards perfection and go and blow right past excellence.
There's a lot of leaders who suffer the same approach, right? I mean, they're perfectionists. They want to do well. They want their teams to do well. It's all positive intent, and it's very difficult to let go of some of that control, or to even show some vulnerability. So, if there is one thing that you can share that could make a dramatic difference, just one thing, what would that one thing be that people could start working on?
I think just to embrace the concept that failure today is preparing you for success tomorrow, right? That you shouldn't let, whether it's the pursuit of perfection or that feeling of control, or the ability, because you have positional power to command somebody to do something, shouldn't give you the false security that that failure isn't going to happen, because it will. And when you start to see failure as part of the process around success, then you're not trying to avoid it all the time.
I appreciate you kind of sharing your stories related to that. And I think there were some great key takeaways as we talk through that. Just to kind of summarize a little bit around that, some of the things that really just came to mind are thinking more and doing less. Love the whole mindset around perfectionist is the thief of excellence. And I appreciate you sharing also how you are reflecting, taking notes, and journaling some of the conversations that seem to have helped you along the way as well.
Yeah, those insights over time start to crystallize your beliefs around leadership, right? Your sort of fundamental leadership philosophy crystallize when you look back at those experiences, those thoughts, those feelings, and you really hold yourself accountable for the way you might have been reacting emotionally versus thinking, logically or even strategically about something.
And the other thing too, just to highlight, is the environment you created, which allows your employees to give you feedback,
Yeah.
right? That they're able to come to you and you're open to it. And even your ability to reach out to others, just to some peers, and just to bounce some ideas off them. I always say how, the biggest resource managers have is each other.
If you go all the way back to that very first experience we talked about when I was a first line manager, you don't know that. When you step into that role, there's a fire hose that's put in your mouth.
Right.
And you
Yes.
are trying to juggle 63 plates in the air any given day. And you don't know that forget light at the end of the tunnel, there's light right beside you, but you just got to reach out to it. I remember a few months into my first line leadership role, I went to a leaders meeting, and I bumped into a very tenured manager on our team. And he pulled me aside in the hallway and he said, boy, he goes, you got these big dark circles under your eyes. What's going on? Are you okay? And I said, I'm exhausted. When is it going to stop? When are these people going to stop calling me?
Right.
When's the work going to slow down? And you and I can both giggle because we know the answer is never.
Right. Exactly.
But he gave me, again, profound advice, which if I had known to reach out earlier, I would have had earlier. And the advice was, apply the 3-day rule where the 3-day rule applies. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, that's basically prioritization. The things that are most imminently going to impact the people who report to you come first. Things that are within the larger lens of the business and our dialogue around strategy and implementation, you may not have to make that phone call today or send that email tomorrow. And it was really probably the beginnings of what I wouldn't know for many years of that: slow down, take a breath, think more, do less. And when you're thinking, reflect on that perspective, capture it if you're a note taker like I am. But I remember that now. I always say that to new leaders who step in. I actually just had the great fortune of promoting somebody on my team into a new leadership role. And I said to him right at the bat, I don't expect from you the things that your peers on the leadership team are doing. I don't. And he said, well, what do you mean? I'm so excited to get this opportunity, and I want to do really well, and I want to make you proud. And that's all code, Rob, for perfectionism. And I recognize it now because I used to say all
Mm.
those same phrases. And I said, no, no, no. You've made me proud by securing the role. You're in it. Now I just want you to take a breath. We'll talk about priorities, get to know your team. And each time we have a one-on-one, which will be weekly for the first couple months, and then we'll space them out after that, we'll take on one new topic to discuss. And then you'll have a week or so to think on it, journal on it if that works for you, reflect on it, and let's talk about it again when we come back and then add the new topic on. I wish I had known to reach out for that kind of help, right?
Yeah.
Seasoned leaders like yourself who were around me back in those days. I would say that to anybody stepping into a new leader role, reach out and ask for insights and perspective.
Yeah, it's so true. It really is. I mean, and there's leaders out there, your peers are more than willing to help, more than willing to share. And it's so great you sharing a story about the new leader you promoted within you. And I'm sure that person, as soon as you said that and had that discussion, they probably just felt like a huge relief to some extent,
Yeah.
even though they still won't get it until like years later. But that's great to even, have that dialogue. So last question for you as we're winding down. I know you're an avid reader. What's one leadership book that you can recommend?
Oh, yes. I love to read. I love to listen to podcasts, TED Talks. So I'll answer the book question first. So thematically, my favorite leadership authors are Patrick Lencioni and Brene Brown. So probably the foundation of my leadership philosophy come from, books like Five Dysfunctions of a Team and Dare to Lead. But I'll tell you that I recently, about a year ago, I picked up a book called Imagine It Forward by Beth Comstock. And I picked it up at a time where I stepped into this new role. I now lead at an enterprise level. And I also stepped into the role at a time where our organization, our leadership, kept talking about, we've got to evolve and innovate and change. And I thought, okay, this is definitely going to be new leadership competencies for me. How do I learn to do
Mhm.
this? And I found this book written by Beth Comstock, who ended up being the first corporate president in GE's history. But she basically led, entire functions in GE through innovation and change. She was the one who, through her book, talked a lot about understanding failure as part of success. And it was a lightning bolt to me, because to
Mhm.
me, they were two completely separate experiences. And she talks a lot about when you're innovating and when you're driving the pace of change, you should expect to fail. You
Mhm.
should prepare for that and celebrate it publicly. Note that you did it, not secretly, and don't whisper it. Publicly state, hey, we tried this, we didn't succeed, but here's what we learned.
Mhm.
And we're going to take those learnings to build success doing it differently. Imagine It Forward by Beth Comstock is a great book for leaders who might be at a point in their journey where they're really having to lead change and innovation. And a quick shout out, if I can, to a podcast shout out or a TED talk from Reed Hastings, who leads Netflix. And that, the Netflix story from the very beginning, when they tried to get bought by Blockbuster and what has happened over the ensuing decade, is fascinating. But he's got a very fresh and unique take on leadership as well, specifically when it comes to transparency and clarity for teams. And so, shout out there for the folks at TED Talks who got Reed Hastings to do a TED Talk. But I highly recommend that you listen to it from the perspective of how you can empower people by trusting them with information so that they understand what the organization is doing.
I'm not familiar with that one, but we'll put both links, the book as well as the TED Talk, in the show notes. So that way,
Okay.
anyone who's interested can easily check it out. Well, Tracey, I want to just thank you for coming in. I sincerely appreciate first your willingness to be vulnerable and share some of your stories. I think they were fascinating and really do appreciate you sharing all of your insights and some of your best practices that I have no doubt others will certainly take a lot of value from it.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for the opportunity. You be well.